Sekeres Price for Thursday, July 18th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're hosting an event downtown, you can choose from over 55,000 square feet of striking indoor-outdoor space. To learn more, contact the Wall. Sales at wallcenter.com. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sass, Hinton Switches, conducting things. Fun show coming up. Fun guests coming up. And we'll start with our poll question. And I want to shout out a follower here. Brian Gamble at BM1NUS. The other day we asked, who do you want to see playing between Pettersson and DeBrusk? And he replied, better question. Regardless of who plays on his wings this year, will Petey finally unseat JT as the number one center? So, who do you consider the Canucks first line center? JT Miller, Elias Pettersson. You can vote. Sekeres Price on X or YouTube. Where'd you go here?
It's JT Miller, and it's pretty handily. I think the salary thing is pretty explainable in today's day and age. Like where that player is age-wise and their free agency status. Highest paid isn't going to necessarily equate to role on team. Certainly there is going to be the hope that in the next couple of years, those two will do their roles, but I don't think it's weird. I don't think there's a failure by anybody. The fact that this guy's paid more than this guy, despite the fact that Miller has the more prominent role. That's just the way the cookie crumbles at this age for Elias Pettersson. He had to be secured this summer, and he had to be secured for the years that he's getting paid for what he will be doing, not for what he has done.
Correct. First of all, I mean, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's more amusing and interest for those of us on the outside looking in than it is anything that's, meat and potatoes.
It's a gauge on perception.
Yeah. Really, it ought to be Elias Pettersson. I think he's a more talented hockey player than JT Miller. And going forward, I think it needs to be Elias Pettersson at $11.6 million. I'll quibble with you a little bit there. You're dedicating that amount of cap space to one player. They need to be your engine, and they need to make others better. But for right now, JT Miller. I think Miller gets more out of his talent. Certainly did over the totality of this season. Now, the reason why I say I think Elias is more talented is outside of skating, and I guess sort of the board work and the more physical style of play, I think Elias is the equal or better to Miller in just about every other category. I think he's a better creator at his high end. I mean, the shot, both of them have terrific shots, but I mean, Elias, the one-timer when it gets going. And, as much as JT has made terrific strides as a defensive player, like I think Elias is a Selke-worthy guy at some point in his career. Who could forget that back check in his first game as a Canuck? No. Now, what I will say, and some days sitting there reading the comments is difficult. Some days you just brighten up because you realize, boy, what a really smart hockey market this is. Tyler, quality of line mates is the big one here, no? Swap JT and EP40, and I bet this changes fast. That's fair.
It could be. We don't know.
Miller played with a 40-goal scorer last year, and Besser had an awesome year. And you can say, well, he helped make Besser. They had chemistry. All of that is fair and true. Take a look at who Elias was playing with at different times last year. Nobody the likes of Besser.
The truth of the matter is we don't know the answer to that. But try to imprint what you saw from Pettersson on the ice with a different winger. And I don't have a lot of confidence that I don't have a lot of confidence that Besser gets to 40 goals, honestly.
Again?
No, like if you just rewind last year, we go back in the DeLorean and Besser gets the assignment with Pettersson for the entire season. Does Besser score 40 with Pettersson? I have trouble believing that. the way that
I probably not.
and
Probably not.
That's not a long-term slag on Pettersson.
No.
I think Pettersson's working through his professional career here, so it's not a drag on him as a total player here. But what works for one guy is not going to work for another, right? So I think we just have to hope that Elias Pettersson's got some chemistry with Jake DeBrusk, and the Canucks have depth in the first two lines.
Grady, where are you going here?
It's JT Miller right now. For this team to be successful going forward, it's got to be Elias Pettersson.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you look at points and overall deployment, matchups, usage, all that stuff, it's clearly JT right now.
Yep.
But when you're making $11.6 million like Elias Pettersson is now, it's time for him to rise to the occasion and push it. But ultimately, it does not matter. You know, it's great to have two capable first line centers down the middle. Yeah. Not a lot of teams have that luxury.
Like Sakic was probably the number one center ahead of Forsberg for some of those years in Colorado, but did it really matter when you're that good? You have that kind of quality that you throw over the boards at center ice with your top two lines.
Yeah, and I mean, and like Draisaitl and too.
Similar, you know, like Forsberg was the better all-around player. Joe was a more gifted offensive player.
And then when push comes to shove late in the game, you don't have to make a decision between the two. You put them both on the line together.
Yeah.
Like we see with Draisaitl and McDavid when they are separated. Like we saw with Malkin and Crosby. Right. When you need it, it's indiscernible because through the first 48 minutes of a game, they're pretty much sharing time. They're on the same power play unit. And then if you're down a goal late in the game, or you definitely need to preserve that lead, you put them both out there at the same time.
Yeah.
So you can have your cake and eat it too, to some degree.
Now, do you remember offhand who averaged more ice time last year between the two of them?
It's a great question. It might be a trick question. I'll say Pettersson.
Yeah, I was going to say the one thing we hadn't actually gone through, the one metric that oftentimes reveals the truth here: time on ice. Pettersson last year averaged 19 minutes and 39 seconds per night. JT Miller, 19 minutes, 29 seconds.
Do you have that's really close. Do you have even strength though in front of you?
I have even strength as well, and you're quite right. That's another metric. JT Miller, 1436.
Yeah.
Elias Pettersson, 1431.
Whoa. Wow.
And neither of them led the team in forwards. Brock Besser, 1450. The even strength time on ice.
Interesting. To me, that most people's definition of first line center is who you're throwing out there more regularly in even strength conditions.
Fair.
But it's so close there. That's a virtual time.
Elias wound up getting the edge because he played 12 more seconds per game on the penalty kill, and 1 more second in average power play ice time between the two of them.
Which is just he's slower getting to the bench on the change.
Yeah. This story from Noah Strang. Good catch here from Noah and Frank, actually from a Reddit user. Thomas Gradin, Canucks legend. Ring of Honor. 38 years with the team. Player. Scout. 8 as a player, 30 as a scout. Is no longer on the Canucks website.
Wow.
In the amateur scout section. He used to be right there on the top row with Todd Harvey, their director of amateur scouting, Ronnie Delorme, who former director of amateur scouting and longtime scout. He's no longer there. So Daily Hive and Noah have reached out to the Canucks for comment, and we'll see what the case is there.
That's interesting. He has been
he's a legacy.
He's just been a constant there and has uncovered so much good talent for the Canucks over the years.
Including Alexander Edler, right?
Yeah.
The incredible story about Alexander Edler.
Finding him in 8th division men's league hockey, effectively playing noon hour drop-in hockey.
Wow.
Not really, but
up in Östersund, as the story goes, Håkan Andersson, the great Red Wings scout in Sweden, who discovered so many of their terrific Swedish players over the years, gets a call from what was Division 3, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Coach he knows up in Östersund, which is a little further north than Sweden, saying, by the way, our best player is an 18-year-old defenseman. You should probably take a look at this kid. And sorry, not the coach. Håkan gets the tip. He calls the coach of the team and says, I want to come up and see this Edler kid, but, is he going to play a lot this weekend? Because, it's quite a journey, and I want to make sure I see a lot of him. And the coach, tells Håkan, oh, yeah, he'll play, and then picks up the phone and calls Thomas Gradin and says, there's another team onto your guy. So, yeah, I mean, that would be quite a departure. This is a guy who's been part of the fabric of the Vancouver Canucks for most of their existence, right? 38 years of the 54.
Well, yeah, don't forget the playing stats too. He's second in points. That's regular and playoff points by a center. Only Henrik Sedin has more points as a centerman for the Vancouver Canucks than Thomas Gradin.
And part of that wave of Swedish players that came over when they did, which really impacted the National Hockey League and international hockey ever since, right? Boris Salming and Mats Naslund and Thomas Gradin, it seemed like every Canadian team had a terrific Swedish player at one point. Anyways, we'll see what else comes of that story with Thomas Gradin. Jake Guentzel has spoken, the Tampa Bay Lightning winger, of course, the apple of the Canucks' eye, the guy they were willing to go all in for in free agency, up to $9.5 million. To lure the one-time Sidney Crosby line mate and Stanley Cup champion with the Pittsburgh Penguins north of the border. Talking to Jesse Pierce of NHL.com, asked why Tampa, quote, they all know how to win. There's just a winning pedigree there, and I still feel like we have a chance to win. You may remember when Carolina traded his rights to Tampa, for a minute there, everyone thought, done deal. Tampa's not doing this deal unless they know he's signing. Then it took a little while, and there was reports that Guentzel had to be convinced that they were going to keep up the winning. With Stamkos on the way out,
I get that.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
With the playoff performance over the last couple of years here that, was Tampa's window not closing, but closed. Are the Lightning, much like Chicago and some others that we have seen had success, were they about to go into their dark days, a period of wandering before they're able to rebuild a championship caliber club? Guentzel, there's a lot of high-end players, elite players on the team, and just an unbelievable opportunity for me and my family to go do something else on our own. It's going to be fun for us. It's going to be different. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be something that we're looking forward to.
I mean, they're going to be competitive. I don't think anybody's doubting that.
Oh, you got Vasilevsky. You got Hedman. You got Kucherov and Point. I mean, there should be a baseline level of competitiveness there for sure. But Blake, by the same token, I would not be surprised if Tampa takes another step back this year.
I mean, I see that team is still a high 90-point team, if not a 100-point team. I mean, their defense is not super deep, but Hedman, McDonough, Chernak, and Moser get you across the finish line. And it's pretty vacant after that.
Well, but it's also kind of vacant once you get past like 5 forwards: Kucherov, Point, Guentzel, maybe 6, Hagel, Cirelli, Paul. Then you're getting into some slimmer pickings there. Older guys like Atkinson and Sheary, Gergensons, pure role players, fourth liner types.
Not great.
Yeah. I'm sure the backup goalie would be.
But that's a playoff team.
Yeah. Now, Connor Geekie is one of the players they acquired from Utah in the Sergachev trades. He's a good young center prospect, so maybe he circles in this year and does okay for them. But look, if you were to tell me that Tampa's going to be fighting for its playoff life in March, I could see that world.
Yeah, but I don't. I mean,
again, probably on the right side of that line, but wouldn't surprise me.
I don't think it's an 85-point year. I don't see.
No,
no.
92.
96.
Okay.
Yeah.
Many of you brought this to our attention. I gotta say, I was actually a little surprised that this took off on social as it did. Perhaps I'm no longer attuned to Leafs fans. We have Jim Hewson on the show. Was it Monday, Grady? I think it was Monday.
Yeah.
Jim, of course, now retired as a broadcaster and works as the executive chair of the BC Hockey Hall of Fame. So they got their induction gala coming up Friday in Penticton at the South Okanagan Event Center. Shea Weber, Sekeres Price amongst the inductees this year. And so we're talking to Jim, and he mentions, and I don't even remember the question.
It was about biggest
I was asking
moments.
him. I was asking him about what it's like to cover a Canadian team on the run,
right.
on a run in the playoffs.
Okay.
The difference between that and another year.
Right. And he says, and quite honestly, when I broadcast as the Maple Leafs, one of the downsides of having the top chair on Hockey Night in Canada is basically you become a Toronto Maple Leafs broadcaster because you're there every Saturday, whether they're good or bad. And as the years have gone by, I've noticed a change in fandom. A part of it is social media. But everyone in the local fan base expects their broadcasters to be like them. They want fans. And if you're not, you must hate them. And I remember seeing the chatter about this with Jim those years ago when the Leafs finally started getting good again, that they were, complaining about the Saturday night broadcast, which was crazy town to me because, Jim's one of the best in the business at calling hockey games. And then secondly, it has long been Hockey Night in Canada as an institution, and John Shannon has told us this, former executive producer of HNIC, that Hockey Night in Canada stood apart from regional broadcasts. It was a national broadcaster. It viewed itself for many years as sort of a caretaker of the sport, or certainly the way the sport is presented on television in Canada. And while you may have guys who called regional games, and of course that wasn't the case with Jim at the time, right? He was just a Hockey Night in Canada guy, but once upon a time, Jim Robson called Canucks games, also called games on Hockey Night in Canada. Remember a time when Ken Daniels was calling Red Wings games and Hockey Night in Canada, Danny Gallivan, Habs and Hockey Night. But you had a national broadcast that was intended to serve coast to coast to coast and focus in on covering the Canadian teams writ large. And of course, the Maple Leafs more so than others, the biggest fan base. And yet there was poor Jim taking all this abuse about not being Leaf fan enough. Like, that's not his job. That's the distinction between the Saturday night national broadcast, like with McDonough and Ray Ferraro on ESPN. They're going to do a national broadcast. They're not calling it from a Bruins perspective or a Red Wings perspective or a Flyers perspective.
And as a fan, though, I don't get why people don't like that. The responses to the tweet that went up.
Yeah, and this was the Leaf Nation that picked it up. The Leafs Nation at TLNDC picked it up, did a post on it, did a story on it.
And the responses underneath that tweet verify what Jim Hewson is saying.
Like, absolutely. Like 1,000,000%.
And in fact, there's a couple that say, we want a homer, give us a homer.
We want Joe Bowen.
Yeah, not on a national broadcast, Leaf fans.
Yeah.
But I just don't get why people want the nonstop pablum of homerism. Like, I get it.
Like Jack Edwards in Boston. Like, it's just
like on a regional broadcast, though.
But and you know what? Even I get it to some degree. Hey, I adjust my call when I'm on the Whitecaps radio network. I have a different call
than when a much different audience.
Yes, than when I'm, and when my TSN call is different than my Apple call. I'm right down the middle on my Apple call. I'm hedging to the Canadian club on TSN.
And when you're doing the radio, you're all about the Caps because that's where a hardcore Caps audience is going to be.
Right. And I don't know why that's lost on fans as to why there is that nuance. I just don't get it. But even when your club radio is still different than regional rights, like Shorty is not a homer. Shorty is Canuck centered, Canuck focused.
Yeah.
But he's not a homer. And he is beloved. So why do Leafs fans not get that difference? Like, Joe Bowen is not Shorty.
Well, I can't believe the gall of asking for a homer broadcast on a national for a homer broadcaster on a national broadcast.
Like, everything who in their right mind? Toronto.
I know, like, who in their right mind would expect that?
Yeah. But I as a fan, if you just extract yourself objectively and look at a broadcast, I always got a kick when I was as a Seahawk fan currently, as a traditional Blue Jays fan as I've been in the past, when you get the national team treatment or the national broadcast treatment for your team, like when the Seahawks are on Monday Night Football, I've always been like, oh, I want to hear how the big guys talk about the Seahawks.
Right.
You earned, well, it's a little different now, but you earned your way to Monday Night Football back in the day, right? Like, Monday Night Football wasn't going to cover any of your games if you were 4-12.
But I want to hear how the national voices regard my team.
Absolutely.
And so I just don't get why people want to see it differently.
Like, back in the day, it was a massive deal if the Blue Jays or the Expos got onto a national broadcast.
Right.
Vin Scully is calling the Expos this Saturday. That was
the Blue Jays making the playoffs was always great because it forced that cause, and you got to hear the big guys talk about the Jays.
93, Sean McDonough, aforementioned.
Yeah.
The world, for the first time ever, the World Series banner is flying north of the border.
Is it
call on CBS when the Blue Jays beat Atlanta?
Is it because
92?
Some casual fans, observers who may not know the ins and outs of broadcasting,
I think some of it.
They see Sportsnet. Oh, Sportsnet has the regional package with TSN.
Yep.
And then they also see Sportsnet Hockey Night in Canada. So they can't really distinguish the two when one is a regional that's geo-blocked for only Ontarians versus national that goes coast to coast.
But in Canada, think some of it is a lack of media literacy. You're absolutely right, Grady. I think in other cases, it's just intellectually easier to be, to draw the line and say with us or against us. Not to mention, the tribalism that has, come to the fore.
In Canada, that is a very casual hockey fan that doesn't understand that distinction. Like, that is the most casual, and that's not who's responding.
Or that's a very myopic Leaf fan.
I think that's the more likely scenario. Yes.
All right. Let's get to our top story. It's brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, and Foolish Winery. A sensational Wednesday night at BC Place for Vancouver Whitecaps FC. They beat Sporting Kansas City 2-1 in a matchup of the two hottest teams in Major League Soccer. They do so before a very good crowd for a Wednesday night, 23,200. They're unbeaten in 5 MLS games, 6 in all competitions, and it's an absolutely glorious game-winning goal that would not have looked out of place at the Copa or the Euro. Sebastian Berhalter with a millimeter-perfect cross from distance to Fafa Picault, who heads it in. He's got 3 goals in his last 5 games. Was a little disgruntled at one point. They had to deny that there was a trade request there. That's the winner with 15 minutes to play. And the Caps vault from 6th place in the MLS West to 4th place in the MLS West, still having games in hand against a lot of teams in their orbit, and now with a very real chance to go see if they can track down one of the Los Angeles clubs or Real Salt Lake in the top 3. But either way, Blake, sitting on what would be a home field playoff advantage in round 1.
Yeah, which is super helpful. And, if you get an upset anywhere else along the way, maybe you get home field in round 2 as well. So, it's a huge deal to get into that top 4 and avoid those top 3 teams for as long as you possibly can, because those are all juggernauts. On the Pico thing, his minutes are going to be a little bit lower than what he's traditionally had. Not, the pace that he's on. He'll probably eclipse last year's minutes, though. And based on production right now, it's 6 goals and 3 assists. There is still an outside chance he has a career year right now. His best ever year is 11 goals, 5 assists, and he's at 6 and 3. There is a very good chance he gets to the 3rd best season he's ever had in MLS.
Mm-hmm.
And then a very good chance he's second or his best ever.
He was indispensable at the start of the season when the Caps went on and had that terrific run, launched into first place in the MLS West, because Brian White was pretty quiet back then. And now this is the second flight of good games he's played in a row, supporting White Gold and the offense. And let's face it, I mean, that's the reason they win last year. First of all, they scored 4 goals. I mean, 2 were called back on offside. Gauld, the sensational Scotsman, he creates the first goal, looking for White in the box. It deflects off a KC defender. But I mean, offensively and the ball movement and the chances created, particularly in the first half. I mean, I'm sitting there in the, thank you very much. You got us very nice tickets to the game last night. First row, everybody. This guy's got some pull. No, so we're sitting there watching it from pretty much field level, and it was really pretty soccer.
It was.
It was good, fun, entertaining, threatening soccer from the Caps.
Ali Ahmed jumping back into the lineup. He was so good in the buildup. His calibration just a little off in finishing, whether it was a shot or that final pass, but it was right there for Ali Ahmed.
Yep.
And Pedro Vite misses an absolute sitter late in the game as well. I mean, yeah, 4 entered the net.
Mm-hmm.
Probably should have been 6 or 7.
Right, it could have been.
It was that close to an absolute
And what I like about it, Blake, is even after all that wonderful play, they give up a tying goal. Their spirit isn't broken. They keep fighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as pretty at that point.
There's about a 10-minute lull there.
Yeah, it's not as pretty, but they go out and they get the winner with, I mean, Pico's the number 2 option, right?
Mm-hmm.
After White.
Yeah.
Berhalter is no Ryan Gauld, but the contributions they get through the 11 last night was outstanding. Anyways, 4th place now. Now they're 6 points back of Real Salt Lake and LAFC, who are tied for 2nd. They do have games in hand against Real. They do not against LAFC. So it is going to take an effort to get there. There are some head-to-head left. Saturday, home, BC Place, 7:30 to Houston. Houston in 8th place, 4 points back of the Caps. Another win Saturday. Now you can start looking at putting some distance between you and maybe not the Cascadia teams that are still, we talked about how they were in the middle of a Cascadia sandwich here, but against some of those teams that are fighting for playoff position. And that's when you start to feel a little bit more secure that you're going to the postseason again this year. That's sort of what's on tap here for the Caps over the next little bit with the MLS regular season games. I know they got Leagues Cup coming up.
Houston just announced a signing from Germany, from Hanover, but I don't think he'll be in the lineup on Saturday, so they'll avoid that for young Lawrence Sinali joining the Houston Dynamo. Nothing on the docket right now, other than that rumor we brought you yesterday, by the way, about the Whitecaps. I do think that player is, I mean, the report is correct from what I can discern. They are interested in that player. Whether or not he's brought in, we'll soon see.
What's up with Yellow Dog this weekend?
There's lots going on with Yellow Dog this weekend. As always, there's fabulous events that they are a part of, and they want you to be a part of as well. So why don't you head over to, well, we've told you about the Port Moody Rib Fest.
Rib Fest in
told
Port
you about
Moody.
District Wine
Village. Love it.
So why don't you just go and grab yourself a Go Get It ginger lime gosa?
I know you like those gosas.
Oh my goodness.
Especially in the summer.
Huh? So refreshing. Lime and ginger, tart finish. It's not quite as sour, almost as sour. It's available in the tasting room in select locations.
Playing golf with Brad from Yellow Dog today. Perhaps I'll have some in the trunk.
Well, I'm not going to be there, so you better save some for me.
Northlands will miss you.
I will miss it.
BC Lions. They're into Calgary this weekend. Of course, they have beaten the Stampeders already once this season in the season opener, 50-cent show here at BC Place. Now going into McMahon Stadium, Farhan Lalji reporting that TJ Lee coming off the Achilles injury. Lions 5-1. So his 6 games on the 6-game injury list spent, and sounds like there's a very good chance he is going to start. That's incredible. He blew the Achilles in the West Final last year.
Wow.
It's mid-November. So he's looking to be back already. Keon Hatcher, the other Achilles injury they have in the receiving core, Farhan saying getting close but won't play until after the bye. And yes, the Lions are in Calgary on Sunday. It's a 4:00 kickoff. Then they have the bye week. Then they go into Winnipeg for Thursday night football on August 1st. Of course, already have a win against the Bombers this year. Looking for another one against the team that has been their white whale. Winnipeg. Lions have won 26-24 already in the Manitoba capital. Winnipeg's playing better football, though, than what they were then. And Calgary's been a tough out this year. Javon Cotoy ribs did not practice on Wednesday. Manny Rugamba coming off a terrific game against Saskatchewan. He was their leading tackler, actually. He's got a knee injury. He did not practice either. So could be a couple of key missing starters there, although with receivers, they just circle the next guy in. And the way McInnes is playing right now, I'm not sure they need another receiver. Rugamba in the secondary would be a loss they have to backfill. The Major League Baseball 2025 schedule is out.
Oh,
this always catches us by surprise because, and it is a family, a couple that does the Major League Baseball. It was for years. Yeah. I should say
you basically used an abacus and a notepad.
That's right.
And
that's right. And somehow, some way, we're able to do the whole Major League Baseball schedule.
So you've your plan. You got the place in Seattle booked sometime
in the dining room. Can you imagine? They're in the dining room. They've got surrounded by whiteboards.
But you got your Seattle trip booked for early July.
Oh, Blake.
What happened?
You know, you used to enjoy that trip when we did it professionally. You used to be all gung-ho, all about it. Now you just make fun.
Oh, it's not a real baseball team, so it's hard to take them seriously.
I guess, huh? I mean, it's still a fun time even when they're not a real baseball team. But for some, and I'll just say it's stupid. It's
bad business.
It's bad business. Yeah. It does not serve the customer. And it's bad business for the Seattle Mariners. The Blue Jays are in Seattle next year on the second weekend in May. The 9th, 10th, and 11th of May. School's still in May.
Yeah. Still pretty cool in May.
Yeah.
No, it's a cover stadium.
You're not getting 25,000 Jays fans from Western Canada making the trip in May.
You're not getting rained on, at least. But it's just, it takes a little sizzle away from what has traditionally been just a
kids aren't out of school. Exactly. Weather isn't as nice. Not deeper into the schedule, where I suppose that's the one thing you could say. At least the Jays may still be in it next year. The second weekend. I mean, I'm glad we went this year, knowing this now, because there were thoughts of skipping it this year. There were thoughts of skipping it this year because we weren't going to miss Castellano, which conflicted on the Saturday, and because, well, we're just not feeling all that great about the team this year. Anyways, for the local Seattle economy, that's a hit, right? Because typically Blue Jays weekend, there are tons of people in bars, restaurants, and hotels, not to mention other activities, Space Needle, museums, all that. And for the Jays fans, a little more difficult to go see your team. Less than 2 weeks from the Major League Baseball trade deadline, and already the excuses are starting with the Seattle front office and ownership. As always, the spokesman, Jerry DiPoto, their president. If I'm a Mariners fan, I would have been sickened listening to this on Seattle Sports Radio yesterday. DiPoto says, of course, because they don't spend money, and Cal Raleigh, their catcher, called them out last year on this. Hey, you want to be like Texas? It's time to start spending like Texas. Or at the very least, take advantage of what is one of the best farm systems in all of baseball. Like the Mariners have 12 to 15 legitimate prospects that in combination could return you one of the biggest names out there on the trade block. We've talked about Jazz Chisholm, the Miami outfielder. We've talked about Luis Robert, the Chicago outfielder. There are
Pete Alonso,
the Mets first baseman. There are bats available if you're willing to pay the price. Here's DiPoto. He'd like to make a dynamic trade, but, quote, I don't know if that's going to be available. Right now, it's not. And this is as late as we've ever gone into a trade deadline where I can honestly say it's not. He goes on to explain that there's not enough sellers because every team seems to be within 3 games of a playoff spot because of the wild card. Asked what his team needs, DiPoto, we don't make enough contact. Oh, who constructed the lineup, Jerry? That's plain and simple. It's our biggest hickey. It's the area where we need to make the most improvement. It's hard to imagine us going into the postseason and doing damage without improving in that area. That's good honesty. At least he's admitting we don't have a chance to win the World Series unless the lineup improves.
But he's also lying that those trades aren't available. They are absolutely available. You just don't want to pay the price.
Exactly. He continues. That's going to come in some part from the guys on our own club. This is making more contact. And obviously, as we come down here these next couple of weeks with the trade deadline, if we can improve in those areas, we'd like to. We'd like to. You need to. John Paul Morosi has done some reporting here. He notes that the Mariners and Tampa Bay Rays have been frequent trading partners, or at least have a lot of dialogue back and forward over the years. He says right now, they haven't engaged in serious dialogue, but they are talking. Players there would include Randy Arozarena, who's had some big Octobers in the past. Yandy Diaz, Isaac Paredes. So some of the Tampa bats potentially being available on top of Chisholm, Robert, Alonso, and some of the other names that are out there. Then there's the Jays, and of course the sell-off. And, Blake, I'm not sure that Bichette is going to re-sign. Less certain on Vladdy. Typically with a regular organization, if you've got a star shortstop or a former star shortstop, because let's face it, it's been an awful year.
But still,
and you get to the trade deadline the year before he becomes an unrestricted free agent, typically that player would be in play. Of course, you've just renovated your ballpark. You've just spent a lot of money renovating your ballpark. So can you go into next year without Bichette and Vladdy at least to sell at the beginning of the year? I'm not sure. Yeah, especially because, and this is from a terrific account on mostly Major League Baseball, but sports finances at Brooks_Gate. How much money each MLB team made last year and how much of that is going towards their payroll this year. Blue Jays rank second on that list. Revenues of $328 million, payroll of $246 million. That's 75% of their revenues. Only the New York Mets and their owner, who's Crazy Town spending, at 87%, spend more percentage of the revenue on the payroll. Tampa's last in the league. They're at 33%. But if you're Edward Rogers and Blue Jays ownership, you look at something like that and go, oh, well, especially with what we spent on the ballpark, maybe we should correct here, market correct, and get a little bit more towards the middle of the pack. I hope that's not the case if you're a Blue Jays fan, but there could be some very lean years ahead. Sure.
If you're Shapiro and Atkins, though, they're 25 and 26 years of age, Guerrero.
Yep.
And Bichette.
Mm-hmm.
You might fall victim to believing, hey, a lot of baseball players peak late 20s.
Yep.
You know,
there's still hope there. It's not like there's a lack of talent with either player, Blake.
And do you risk looking like a fool if you liquidate and one of these guys?
I think you do.
Yanks 41 the next year.
I think you do. And look, these guys have been risk adverse. There's no doubt about that. They have not been willing to take the big swings that their predecessor, Alex Anthopoulos, did in Toronto and has since done in Atlanta, where he's won a World Series championship.
Yeah.
Also, we do have a track record here with this management group, Shatkins. This is Josh Goldberg. Jays were sellers in 2019. So the big piece they had back then was Marcus Stroman. They sent him to the Mets. They got two quality pitching prospects, Anthony Kay, Simeon Woods-Richardson. They later parlayed Woods-Richardson, moved him to the Twins as part of the Barrios deal. And in fact, Woods-Richardson has had a very good year. Kay was a lefty starter reliever, didn't really make it. They also made some minor trades there, trade off some, bit parts. And they made the Aaron Sanchez, Joe Biagini trade. You remember Biagini?
Yeah,
They brought in Derek Fisher, who is a power speed guy who didn't make a lot of contact, and he didn't work out either. So it was not a particularly great deadline for them in 2019 when they were sellers, although they did get a quality piece in Woods-Richardson that they upgraded on. So we'll see. If it's not Bichette and Guerrero, certainly Kikuchi, who's a UFA, Danny Jansen, who is a UFA, the catcher. You got some relievers there. If Jimmy Garcia is healthy, Justin Turner as a bench bat for a contender, absolutely. I think no one wants Kevin Kiermaier because they put him on waivers and nobody bid. So may have to eat some salary there if you're moving him on. But those would be the pieces in play for the Blue Jays. And, for the M's, again, chalk a block and position player prospects too, Blake. It's like some of these guys aren't going to fit their timeline because that rotation that's a World Series rotation now.
No players are available.
No players are available. We have our eyes on the Open Championship at Royal Troon, where the Irishman Shane Lowry, who has already got a clear jug, has had a marvelous round. Scores were, it was a difficult day at Royal Troon.
It was. But Lowry did well. Ends up in at 66, 5 under par. That's an unbelievable round.
Especially in comparison where some of these numbers were earlier in the day. Rory McIlroy, 7 over par.
Barely beat Tiger, who's at 8.
And Tiger did not look like he was having any fun. Monty was right. Tiger did not look like he was having any fun. The Canadian Mackenzie Hughes, he was our best, huh?
Yeah.
Today?
Yeah. And Corey Connors is in it too. The two of them are in it. So that's good. They're one run deep and they're going to need to be one of the lower rounds of the day in the next couple.
For sure.
But they are in it. Two of the 4 are in it. Hadwin and Taylor had a bit of a tougher day. Though they've got a chance to make the cut, those two, but they're not going to be.
Where was Scheffler? What happened to Scheffler?
I didn't see Scheffler. But he's in it too. He's just around. Some at 1 under.
Oh, sorry. He's
even.
Yeah. But Rory 78. The 10-year drought is not ending here. It'll be an 11-year drought for Rory.
Yeah.
Going into next season. PGA champion Xander Schauffele is there at 200 as well, looking for a second major this year. Right? And boy, DeChambeau had him a day. he struggled mightily out of the chute.
Yeah, I mean it's
today.
It's tough. It's really narrow, and the
5 over
fescue's up, and yeah, this is looking pretty vintage Open Championship.
I'm a little surprised only because like this course was Stenson and Mickelson destroyed this course 8 years ago, but the weather being a thing as it normally is, that oftentimes is the defense. Of Open Championship courses. Okay, let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta. Fantastic spot to catch the game throughout the season. A quick walk to the rink or stadium. Go-to spot for food, drink, fun before or after the game. Make it a game night at Greta 50 West Cordova or at gretabar.com. We've got Rob Williams coming up. Rob, the hockey guy, on seat beat at Rogers Arena, or is he really? Is he just a little negligent?
We're holding his feet to the fire.
Indeed.
Yeah.
We'll also talk Pettersson. We'll talk Silovs. We'll talk line combinations with him. And we'll talk sushi racing at the Nat.
The important stuff.
Yeah. And
can you tell it's July?
I would
Vancouver
talk sushi
Canadians
racing anytime.
Vancouver Canadians return to the Nat tomorrow, Friday, July 19th for a nooner. You got the fireworks extravaganza Saturday after the game. That's a 7:00 start, and family fun Sunday. 1:00 first pitch. Then they're back here for 12 straight games, back-to-back homestands. It's not something you see a lot in minor league baseball, but schedule maker. Perhaps it's the same couple that does the major league. Perhaps it's their kids. They outsource it. Back for 12 straight starting July 30th. These games will be busy. Get your tickets, CanadiansBaseball.com. Vanni Sartini is going to join us as well. And, you know, oftentimes coaches coming off of good wins, especially the day later, you know, they want the even keel. We haven't achieved anything yet. Let's not get too impressed with ourselves. Work hard. His pleasure.
Or his pleasure.
Yes, sorry. Vanni was still beaming. And rightfully so, the way his team played last night.
I mean, he generally is a man of strong emotion. He has, after some matches, said, I don't know that we could have played worse than what we played. So he's balancing it. They played a very nice match.
Let's time now for Bet365 Bets of the Day. A segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner Sekeres Price. We love having them aboard. So I had success taking points in the Canadian Football League this year. But as I told you from the get-go, I take the points early when we don't yet know who's good and who's bad, and when the offense's timing isn't quite yet there in sync. It's time to turn that around now. We've had 6 weeks of play. We have a better handle on who's good and who's bad. We also should have offenses clicking. Certainly the Lions offense is clicking at high efficiency. So it's 4.5 in Calgary on Sunday. May pick that game tomorrow, but for today, love laying points when it's less than 3. Argos minus 2.5 at their arch rival Hamilton Tiger Cats on Saturday.
We've talked about how this is a summer Olympics of our team sports rising up, where we haven't necessarily been the strongest. One of those team sports, Canada's Sevens women's rugby team. You're getting long odds here. It's a good team. Long odds because the teams that are at the tippy top are so good, but they're actually the 5th best odds. Canada's women to get gold plus 2,500 in women's sevens. You don't have to put down much.
Does women's 7 have a dominant side?
Believe it or not, they don't call them the All Blacks, I don't think.
No, New Zealand. Yeah. Stands to reason. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Rob Williams coming up next.
hockey season may be over, but it's always a great time at Greta.
Air hockey season is never over.
Right.
And at Greta, it's the best air hockey table around, but all the best games. So never mind waiting for somebody else to stage something in Vancouver for you this summer. You can stage your own thing. The fun is always there at Greta.
A quick walk to the rink or stadium. It's a go-to spot before the game, after the game. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com.
Our next guest brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club. Off to an incredible start here in 2024. It's a magnificent property. It's an awesome golf course. The service is top-notch, and the views spectacular. Invite you to check it out, and remind group organizers of 12 or more, not too early to book those September, October corporate and buddy trips. Prime time's filling up fast. Just for reaching out and booking that trip, you, the organizer, you play for free. Tell us about your group, whistlergolf.com/groups. And we welcome in the national sports editor of the Daily Hive and its offside sports vertical, Rob the Hockey Guy on Twitter, the one and only Rob Williams. How are you?
I'm going to Whistler tomorrow.
Are you?
Attaboy.
Yeah.
What are you going to do in Whistler?
We're going to do some golfing. I wish I knew about this golf deal here. I would have.
I brought 11 friends.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
We'll have some fun there.
Yeah. If you want to play the Whistler Golf Club, do that. Rob, all right, we've got it in there.
Start calling in some favors here.
Right, exactly. Before we get going, and we're going to talk Archer Silovs here, we're going to talk Pettersson DeBrusque wingers, and we're going to talk Pettersson Miller and slotting lines here. Not to mention sushi races. We have a listener who week in, week out has been asking us to ask Rob Williams about the color of seats at Rogers Arena, right? This was supposed to be the summer, right, Rob? What can you tell us
It's a big summer
about the color of
Rogers
seats
Arena.
at Rogers Arena?
And I don't want to live in a world where you don't have an update on this.
Oh God, you guys are putting me to shame here. I think you guys did something like this last year, and I felt shame because I didn't have an update for you, and I got to work and I brought something for you the next week. So I'll see what I can do for next week. I know JPat was doing some reporting on this when he was at Rogers Arena. Was it a couple of weeks ago?
JPat, this is your beat.
Listen to
I
him.
understand. Yeah, no, but I know the last report is they were still all maroon, right? Like, so they got to get cracking here. Like, what have they got? They got like a month and a half to like replace all the seats at Rogers Arena. So yeah, it does seem a little bit suspect. You think if they announced that they were going to replace them all for next season, that we're supposed to be seeing all black seats next year, you'd think, like, how long does that take to do? They got to get cracking on this if it's going to happen. But they've been slow on renovations before, where they're supposed to have things done. And I think last season it started off as a bit of a mini construction site.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
2 years ago was horrible.
Yeah.
And of course the practice facility, we were going to know more there too. Anyways, okay, next week or soon we need the seat up. This is your beat, Rob. I mean, I don't want to admonish you, but the market requires your reportage and your leadership on this file.
I will be better.
Moving right along. Our poll question, and it's driven by a listener who said, well, why don't you guys ask this? It's a good shout. Elias Pettersson and his $11.6 million salary. JT Miller. Who do you consider the Vancouver Canucks first line center?
Well, I think in theory it's Elias Pettersson, and probably up to last season, Elias Pettersson's the answer. Last season it wasn't. It was JT Miller. And I think with everyone penciling in their line combinations, everyone's penciling in Brock Besser next to JT Miller. That's your best winger. I think that was your best center last year. So, until we see otherwise, I think it's JT Miller. But of course, we know the potential that Elias Pettersson has. It wouldn't surprise me if he came in next season and led the team in scoring, had a phenomenal bounce back year. Like with that, I don't think that would surprise any of us. And so so right now, I think when you're jotting down your line combinations, you jot down JT Miller first, and then you put down Pettersson on the second line. But let's see what next season has to offer, because I think it's in flux, certainly.
Yeah. And staying with Pettersson, we assume DeBrusk is going to play on his left wing. Who do you want to see on the other wing?
I think some of this depends on where does Pius Suter play next season. Is he third line center? Is he on the wing again with Miller and Besser? I think it probably makes sense for him to, if they can slide him into the 3C spot and play him there, and then that shifts some other things. Is Danton Heinen on your first line? Does Danton Heinen maybe fit on the Pettersson line and give a little bit more grit and sandpaper to Petey and DeBrusk? And we're assuming DeBrusk. Hopefully they have good chemistry together. You never know, though, right? But it does appear that they're going to start together. When I'm putting together my lines, I'm putting Nils Höglander there. I think that he showed some you keep a bit of that chemistry from last season. He seemed to play well with Pettersson. But talk about things that are in flux. I think there's a lot of different options that they can have there. And I think back to last year with Connor Garland, Dakota Joshua, Teddy Bluger. We never thought that those three would form a great trio, and they ended up having wonderful chemistry together.
Right, and so you're okay with moving Suter into that spot and bumping Bluger down to fourth line center, is what I'm hearing, Rob.
Yeah, I think Suter is. I think you're probably better off having Suter as your 3C. I think that's such an important position on a team, right? Like that, we talk about top six, bottom six, but like bottom six center is a much more important role, I think, than bottom six winger. So if you have him solidifying that, and hopefully I think the Canucks have improved their winger depth over free agency here, that it should allow you to play Suter into his natural position of center. You also don't have, you're also missing Elias Lindholm now. So you're missing some of that center depth, and then you've added winger depth. So I think that probably adds up to Suter playing at center.
Artur Silovs signs this week, and apropos nothing, it's like a minimum deal. Effectively, it's $866 per year. I mean, I'm guessing they just knew that there's really no room for negotiation here, so we're just going to give this the least priority. But they come away with their goaltending duo set? Question mark? Is that the goaltending duo?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he proved enough last season to at least get a shot at not even just a shot at being the backup, like penciling him in to be the backup goalie coming into the season. It's not like you can tell much from a goaltender's performance in preseason anyways. Like, are you going to change your whole plans based off of 2 starts, right? So I think you give that spot to Silovs until he shows you that he can't do it. I think this is it's a really big year, not only for Silovs for himself, but Silovs for the team. And he's going to be the backup, but you've got an injury-prone starting goalie now. Like, Thatcher Demko has had his season end with an injury 2 of the last 3 years, and he missed most of the season in the middle. So you have to, at this point, guard against injury to Demko. You can't have him playing 60+ games. I think it's too risky. You might end up in a situation like you did this year, where you have a great season, you get into the playoffs, but what does he have left in the playoffs? In saying that, we can't assume that the Canucks are just going to waltz into the postseason because they had one good year. So you're going to need if you're going to rest Demko, you can't be resting Demko and thinking, and having this huge drop off to Silovs. So Silovs, I think it's very important for Silovs to play well, particularly early on in the season, to get the confidence of Rick Tocchet and the team to be able to play him, to be able to rest Demko. I think it's going to be an interesting storyline to follow, because it's just the backup goalie, but I think it's actually especially really important for this team.
Well, we've seen this team have to make very hard decisions in goal in years gone by. Schneider v. Luongo, Markstrom and Demko. They've got 2 years left on both of their deals, and there's no rush to make a deal this year. But you're right; it's an info gathering year on Silovs to know whether or not they've got another one of those scenarios where they have to decide, do we extend Demko?
That's it.
Or do we move on to the Silovs era? And again, you're not making that move this year, but in 12 months, you might be looking at that scenario.
Long way to go for before I'm ready to anoint Silovs the next great Vancouver Canucks goaltender. But you're absolutely right. Like, this is, a lot can change in a year or two, right? Like, what did we think about Silovs coming into last season? I think some people had him being the backup, of course, until the late trade for Casey DeSmith. What is he now? Like, I mean, it's not like he lit the AHL on fire. So I'm not quite sure what to make of him yet, in terms of, like, I think he's absolutely an NHL goaltender, but how good can he be? Goaltending's it's probably a bit of a fool's game to try to predict goaltending in the National Hockey League.
No, you're absolutely right, Rob. No one is anointing him the Canucks great goaltender just yet. That's a long road, but as Blake notes, it is a shorter pathway to the determination. Is this the successor? Is this the new starting goaltender, the future starting goaltender? And Silovs, I think, is going to tell us a lot about that. Okay. One of the favorite traditions for Vancouverites in the summer is not just to go attend a Vancouver Canadians game in Nat Bailey Stadium, but to cheer on the most popular sushi race. And full disclosure, I know a couple of the contesting sushi racers. Secondly, I also know the backstory about how the sushi race came to be, but I understand you have sushi race tea, Rob Williams, and we'll be writing about this at the Daily Hive. Please, pray tell.
They're human underneath all that sushi?
So I'm told they are human underneath the sushi costumes. Yeah, I've got a story that's it's going to be published this morning on Daily Hive, all about the sushi races. This is a story I've been wanting to do for like 2 years, that I've been saying I got to write about the sushi races. Finally have done it. I spoke to the person who's in charge of the sushi races, who brings the sushi to the start line and says, "Ready, set, go." I also spoke to the original Chef Wasabi from back in 2008, and he kind of told me about how, and I've forgotten about all this, but like how the sushi races have actually evolved. It started off as like Chef Wasabi was like a WWE villain, and the race was completely rigged. So the one thing that I'm not sure that a lot of people know, like the sushi races apparently not rigged at all. Like it's a true race. And apparently there was a bookie that had a book on it, was taking bets and had a book on this at some point pre-pandemic. Haven't been able to fully confirm that, but that was a bit of an urban legend that I heard.
You know what I love about our line of work here is that while
the important stories, the stories that matter,
like the sentence that came out of Rob Williams's mouth there, that this is a story I've been looking forward to doing for a number for a news reporter. That's about like government corruption. That's about, the justice system, whatever. For you, got to get to the bottom of this.
You know what? I believe this to be the most the sushi races are the most Instagrammed piece of Vancouver sports
content.
Like when the sushi racers go around the track, everyone gets their phone out. Like everyone gets their phone out. I've been to games with hardcore sports fans. We've had company outings to, with people that are, much more casual sports fans or not even really sports fans. They might have no interest in the game, but when the sushi racers step to the line, everyone jumps to attention.
That is a moment of intensity and expectation, much like when two heavyweights come together in the center of the ring for the championship, much like the starting gate at the Kentucky Derby. Very exciting when the sushi racers get penned up down the first base line there, getting ready to explode out of the gate.
Is it the Nationals that do the ex-presidents?
Yes, the Nationals do the ex-presidents.
I love that we have inanimate objects. Right.
So here's the story on that. As you know, our dear friend, former C's president, Andy Dunn, he's an American. He's Florida, Georgia guy. Worked for the Washington Nationals. Actually got their original ballpark set up there after the Expos moved. So he comes to Vancouver, and he'll be the first to admit, kind of a fish out of water. Like it was all very new to him. Culturally, Vancouver was way different than what Andy had experienced because, his experience with Canada was Expos, Blue Jays and Expos, Toronto and Montreal.
Sure.
So the Nationals were doing their very popular ex-president's race. There was also, what do they call him? The Flash, the Blaze, the guy who gives the fan from the stands a huge head start on the warning track. And Andy's like, okay, we're going to do some sort of race, but it's got to be locally hooked. Like it's got to be something like that is truly Vancouver. And he's driving around town and he's saying to himself, how many damn sushi restaurants are in this city? He's like, I can't drive a single block without a sushi race. So he calls the team together and says, do you think we can do this with sushi? He's not a big sushi guy either. And they're like, oh yeah, we can do this with sushi. And thus the tradition is born. And of course, Chef Wasabi never won for years, Rob. The fix was in against the chef.
So I got the tea on that though. He won his very first race in year one, and the last game of the season. Person I spoke to was the chef. He was in the Chef Wasabi suit for nearly every game.
Mm-hmm.
And last game of the season in 2008, they threw somebody else into the suit who seemingly didn't know what the shtick was, and he races around and wins the race. And apparently the crowd went wild.
Yes.
And that was Chef Wasabi's first win.
If I'm not mistaken, I think our old friend Rob Fay might have done a press release on that. It was a big, and like the final day of the season, perfect, right? Like you waited all year, and now finally the chef with the breakthrough.
The Washington Generals won a few games, believe it or not. So you never know when
they were due.
Tweak the storyline.
Are you familiar with the names of the other sushi racers?
I didn't know they had other official names.
Kapamaki.
Oh, well, that's just the sushi roll, yeah.
Miss BC roll.
Miss BC roll,
yeah.
Okay.
Sadaharu soy.
Okay.
Sadaharu.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And chop and stick or the others.
Chop and stick. Very good, Rob. Yeah. We were about to have an E&O there, and Rob Williams saved us. So he wasn't great off the start of this interview. He didn't have the seat color update, but boy, did he deliver with sushi racing.
Where do you get the names?
At the back.
Are they announced?
The Vancouver Canadians have some really smart, creative people working for them.
No, but how do you
have for many?
But do they announce them at the start of the race? The names of all the contestants?
Yeah, I believe he gets so.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you get a play-by-play. You get like a racetrack announcing.
Right. I'm always distracted.
Yeah, Blake's like several beers deep when sushi races.
I'm hosting usually, shaking hands.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Rob, this was awesome. That's the perfect summer hit, buddy. Sushi racing.
Yep.
And tea at the Nat.
Seats next time.
We will see you there this weekend, buddy.
I'll get to work. Thanks, guys.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
joined by the head coach of Vancouver Whitecaps FC. They beat Sporting KC 2-1 Wednesday at BC Place before a big crowd. Vault to fourth place in MLS West. Our pleasure to welcome back Vanni Sartini to the program. Coach, magnifico last night. Well done. What a win. Tell us about it.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Blake. It was like a really good performance for, 75 out of 90 minutes, and amazing, stellar performance for the first half. I think the first half was like fantastic.
The only thing missing was the finish. I mean, which you've had a ton of, so I was almost surprised that they weren't going in by the bucket load. But you're right, the dominance, the attack. I mean, we've forgotten a little bit about Ali Ahmed because he's been with the Canadian team, but I don't know that I've seen him as rambunctious offensively as we saw him there. Did he come back with a boatload of confidence, do you think?
Yeah, probably, yes. And also probably being used to the last 3-4 games that he played to the highest level possible, playing, the world champions, playing Uruguay, playing Venezuela in the quarterfinal of the Copa America. The rhythm, of course, is always million miles per hour. So that's what you saw yesterday. I think yesterday was dominant in the preparation to the final third thing, like, what he does, like the dribbling, the going. He was still off target, I don't know, off sync for the last pass, because, he had a couple of chances that he could have done better, and he made a couple of mistakes, and especially the first one with Brian, I think he could have gave the ball earlier. The second one with Goldie, I think it's really hard to do better than he did, but the first one, I think it's a little bit of his mistake to wait too much to give the ball to Brian.
That's where that expected goal stat is so weird. Hey. He's got a sitter. Pedro's got a sitter later. I mean, it could have been 5 goals in the back of the net.
Yeah,
really
it could. But again, also they had to like the guy on the line at the beginning on Brian. So it's okay. We won. So we don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, you say not by the bucket. They scored 4 goals. They had 2 called back.
That's true.
Offside. Yes. So the ball hit the twine a fair bit last night. At BC Place for Vanni's team. I want to ask you about the 2 guys who combined on the winning goal. Because I think they're both interesting stories right now. First of all, is Fafa Picault, is he a little happier being here these days?
I hope so. He's always been happy, in my opinion, in the sense of he's a very positive guy. He brings a joyous attitude. He's like, it's a force of nature, to be honest. In a lot of things that he does like a million things at the same time. He's a soccer player, he's an influencer, he's a songwriter, whatever. So that's like at the same time, he, like everyone, when you enter into the group, you need to be part of the group, not only in terms of vibe, but also in terms of the culture of the group, what we're trying to do, on the field and everything. And in terms of my task is always to look after the team, not the individual, because every player is an individual as a human, but as a player, they are not an individual. They're just a member of the team. So, and every decision that I take is for the best of the team. So, of course, he is a little bit, I don't want to say unhappy or maybe disappointed that he is not starting every game, but that's how it works here.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, he was indispensable for you guys early in the season in your offensive tack, and now we've seen this over the last 5 games that he does a million things in life. To me, that sounds like a Vanni Sartini type of guy, right? We all know you're a Renaissance man. You do all sorts of things away from soccer coaching. The cross from Berhalter is extraordinary. I mean, it is millimeter perfect.
Beckham-like.
Yeah. Needless to say, it was a difficult month for the Berhalter family with his father coaching the U.S. team in Copa and underachieving, and then later getting
dismissed. Has that weighed on him at all? Have you had to, talk to him about any?
Well, we talk. Well, talk to him also. I talk to because I'm a friend of Greg too. So that's the thing. Like I talked to Greg. I talked to him like a little bit, like very. To him very superficially, and it didn't have, of course it was like said that happened to his dad, but didn't affect him from soccer perspective. Sebastian is a very intense person, and is someone who can bring a lot of pressure on himself in trying to improve himself, and that is his strength, and sometimes is his weakness. It's been his weakness at the beginning of the season when things for him weren't going in the right direction, and he wasn't able to get out of the hole because he was putting more and more pressure to himself to try to do better. At the same time, now that he's on a roll, like, yesterday was the first time that he was on the bench after I think 8 or 9 starts in a row. The pressure that he puts himself, he brings to reach new level every game, and that's you saw yesterday. Like it's a guy that we have. So we have a guy. We have a technology that we use for set plays and everything. And in the package of using the technology, we had a guy that he was a former NFL kicker that came to us to work 2-3 days on kicking the ball with the guys that kick the set plays. And I can tell you that he changed a little bit his way of kicking the ball after working a lot after this feedback that he received. And maybe the great precision on the cross yesterday was also given by the dedication and the work that he did, and so I'm very happy for him.
I always thought he was an understudy for Andres Kubas, but are you seeing him as a wide player now?
He's a Swiss Army knife. He can play everywhere. I gotta be honest. I think that his best position is number 8, in my opinion, because he runs in the space, he attack, but he can play wide. He can play 6 as Andres. At the moment, to be honest, if Andres is not playing, we play Pedro there because Sebastian is better in other position.
Right. Let's talk about
just before that's a awesome little anecdote about cross training and bringing in the NFL kicker, Vanni. Who was it? Do you remember?
It was a Danish guy. It was a Danish guy that he played a lot because the company that we use is called Trackman, and it's the Danish company. And he's a Danish guy that he was a lot in the European Football League, but he also played 1.5 season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But he was the understudy as a kicker there.
Okay. Thought for a second he was going to drop Morten Anderson on us. That was the all-time leading scorer at one point.
Yeah. But these guys, can kick the ball like.
We're in the middle of a transfer window. You guys, and I've heard Axel talk about the reinsertion of Sam Adekubi feeling like a bit of a transfer window acquisition, and I understand why he says that, but ultimately it is an opportunity to add another body. Do you expect at this point, do you expect that you'll get an impactful player in this transfer window, or are you thinking it's going to be more modest building?
I hope, but again, so we don't need players. Okay, the players that we have are good. And when we have players like this, like windows like this, when someone comes, it's very hard to be an impactful player. To be honest, the only one who get an immediate impact, the only 2, to be honest, they get one because Brian arrived in the first window. The only one who had an immediate impact has been Ryan Gold when he came in July, and we had it in the round of 2021 to get into the playoff. Because even very good players, when they joined us, give you an example, Alessandro Schoff and Julian Gressel, 2022, their first month were okay, nothing more than okay. Then in 2023, they became really important players. Last year, Richie Larea came, Rich, great player, played for the national team. I think he didn't have the impact that he would have had if he probably had started the season with us. So I'm not expecting the fact. I can hope that we're gonna sign someone that is gonna be impactful. I don't wanna sell, dreams just for dream and say this guy is gonna have an impact immediately, because it's hard when you come to MLS. This guy or guys, whatever, if someone will come. So, but I think that the club will do something.
Have we seen the last of Javane Brown in a Whitecaps uniform?
I don't know. We will see. We will see. Again, the market is open and everyone is there. I know that there's a little bit of chatter around possible transfer, possible trades about him, and he did very well, to be honest, this season. And so there's interest for him, and also the department where we have more players is the defenders at the moment, because when Tristan will be back, then we have Bilal that he will have the chance to show himself in the Leagues Cup. So we will see if he can start and being a more consistent part of a rotation. So we will see. But again, I want to repeat this. Let's say if we don't do anything, I'm very happy. If we stay with the roster that we are now, I'm very happy.
A word or two, as mentioned, Coach, you're up to 4th place now in the MLS West. There's a bit of a gap between 4th place and the top 3, but you have games in hand. A word or two about Houston on Saturday, and perhaps a quest to track down Real and the LA teams into the top 3.
Yeah, the top 3, it's going to be very hard, because they need to also slow down them, because they win they win every time. So I think we need to focus ourselves to win games, especially like Saturday. It's going to be really hard. This is the last game of a very long push where we played every time Wednesday, Saturday. But if we win Saturday, is a very important win, because every game that we can win against teams that are behind us and put a little bit more margin in between us and them, it's going to be really important. The other thing is that we have 11 games remaining, and 7 of them are at BC Place. If we do our job at BC Place, we are, I think, in a very good position in the playoffs. So that's very important to do the thing good at home.
How many minutes for Sam on Saturday? What do you think he can do?
So I think around 30. Probably. Yeah, more than last the last week in St. Louis. I hope that everything goes well, because if everything goes well, probably we can think about starting Sam in one of the games of the Leagues Cup, and to see if he can be really the guy. So Sam is going to help a lot when he's going to be back.
Lastly, Vanni, because I know you're a fan of the game, a fan of coaching, and you and Barbara fans of Canada as well. What do you make of the job Jesse Marsh did with such little runway in advance of the Copa in leading the Canadian side?
I think outstanding. I think he did a fantastic job. What he did in few weeks, basically, because we're not talking about months, it's talking about like 6 or 7 weeks, is to creating an identity of the team, and that is really, really, really the most outstanding thing that he did. Like, the players are really focused on what they do. You could see the style of play is very aggressive 4-4-2, and every player is trying to press and be. I never saw Jonathan David run like he ran like in this Copa America, to be honest. And also what I really liked is the fact that he made bold choices because he believed then in those bold choices, and when they pay off, you have the upper hands, like Moise Bombito, Jacob Schaffelberg, Max in goal finally as the clear number 1. And that it's a reminder for our friends south of the border that I think they overlook too much MLS, and they think that they're better than they are with those players that play in Europe. But there's a lot of players in MLS that are good, that can play at the international level.
Mm-hmm. We thank you for the time.
Mhm.
Best of luck Saturday. Nice catching up with you, my friend. Okay, all the best.
Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.